In this chapter of our series on Drush, we'll be covering some commands that are handy in developing a Drupal site and useful for developers. The first one that I find myself using constantly is cache clear. So the alias for that is cc. So when you're in the web root of your Drupal site, you can just run drush cc, and then you'll be presented with a list of possible caches that you can clear. You can just select one of those and hit enter, and then Drush will take care of clearing the cache for you. Another shortcut for using cache clear is just using the name of the cache. So you can do drush cc all, and without prompting you, that will just also clear the cache. You can get more information about this command with the help flag. In this case, it's not particularly useful. Another really handy tool that I don't think a lot of people know about is the Drush command line. If I browse my list of available commands up here near the top, there's this command core-cli, or just CLI for short. And basically what it does is it's a wrapper around the bash shell that's optimized with a few little handy shortcuts specifically to make a Drupal developer's life a little bit easier. So let's see how we can use that. You just start off with typing drush CLI, and then you'll notice that the shell prompt changes to drush. And I can just type help to see a list of commands. Looks a lot like just running drush with a regular bash shell, but without the word drush in front of it. So one of the pieces I find most useful with the drush command line is it saves me 6 keystrokes every time I go to issue a drush command, which typing drush for 8 hours a day actually adds up to quite a lot. Now that we've got the drush command line open, let's take a look at an example command. One I find myself using a lot is the project manager list, or PM list. It just will give you printout of all of the modules on your site and whether or not they've been enabled. But since this can be quite a long list, if you have a lot of contrib modules, I actually pipe this through grep often to see if, for example, I have the views module enabled on this site. And I don't at the moment. So now if I want to turn on views via drush, I can just run en views and views UI. And I will get a dialog. Let's say yes. And now the modules are enabled without having to type drush, which is pretty cool. Another really handy shortcut that the command line gets you is dd. It's sort of an alias for change directory, but it stands for Drupal directory. So in this case I could do, right now I'm in just my site's default folder, but if I do dd views, it will change into the directory with all of my views files. Actually it's cdd. There we go. So now I'm in the directory with my views module. So rather than having to remember the full file path and typing out the full file path every time to jump from one module directory to another directory, this also works for themes. So in the site I'm on right now, I have the Zen theme installed. So I can do cdd Zen, and I'll be in my theme folder. And then I can jump back and forth between modules very quickly. Another handy command for development is variable get and variable set. If I run help, they basically will just retrieve and display variables from the variable table. So if you want to do things like vget site name, site underscore name. So the current site I'm working on is drush.local. If I wanted to change the name of my site, I could just do vset site name and then the new value of the variable. And it will prompt me to make sure I want to save that particular variable name. And now if I run vget again, the name of my site is now demo site. So this is pretty handy if you have a particular variable that you'll be changing on or off, or to a particular value while you're doing development. Another really handy command is the php eval command. This will basically let you run any arbitrary PHP code in a fully bootstrapped Drupal environment. So you'll have access to all of Drupal's API functions. So you could do something like php eval var dump user load 1 to get information about user ID 1. And this will print it out using the var dump function just for debugging. You could write any sort of PHP script and make use of this php eval. So if you need to en masse block users or create taxonomy terms or any sort of PHP script you can write that you would like to execute from the command line in a fully bootstrapped Drupal environment can make use of this php eval command. Another set of commands that I find really useful when developing a site are that come as part of the devel module, and they're the devel generate commands. So there's actually a separate module called devel generate that you can turn on that will give you the ability to generate test content and taxonomy terms and users. So we can take a look at just my fresh Drupal 6 install, just a plain empty site. Let's make sure the module is on first. Okay, it doesn't look like I have them turned on. So we'll go ahead and first enable devel and devel generate. And my little -y flag just skips the dialog, so it says yes, I want these enabled. Okay, now that we have devel generate turned on, we can make use of this genc command to generate content. So first off, let's run devel genc with the help flags. So one of the important things to keep in mind when using the drush command line is that when you run drush CLI and the drush shell is initialized, that's when the environment variables get set. So if you do things like add contrib modules now, like say the devel generate module, those command shortcuts won't be available to this particular drush shell instance. You'd have to actually create another instance of the drush CLI for those command aliases to work. So if we take a look at what those commands actually look like, generate -content will work because that's a recognized drush command, but if you try running drush genc after you've turned on the devel generate module from within a drush CLI session, that alias won't be recognized. So if I run help again, we can see the list. We have generate content, generate taxonomy, and generate users. So let's go ahead and take a look at the genc command to generate content with the help flag. And we'll see that it takes a couple of arguments. It takes the number of nodes that we want to generate and then the maximum number of comments that we're going to add to those nodes. And there are a few other flags as well. But let's just run genc 100 to create 100 pieces of content. So that happens pretty quickly. We'll see that devel generate created 100 nodes for us without comments in this case. And if I hop back over to the test site, we'll see that we do now in fact have content. So this is a really great fast way to populate your site with test data. We can use, similar to the genc command, we can use genu to create test user accounts or test taxonomy terms. These commands work much the same way and take similar arguments. So if you needed to create 100 user accounts, you could just do genu 100, and then now as we browse on our test site, we'll see that we have 100 user accounts. Great. This is a really quick way for us to populate a site with test data that can be useful for theming or building out views, or just in general making sure that your content types are set up correctly. A couple other commands that I find to be occasionally helpful have to do with interacting with users. So let's take a look at those after running help. We'll see that there's a user add role command that will let us add a particular named role to a specific user account. There's a corresponding user block and user unblock commands that if you just need to deny access to a particular user ID, you can take care of that with Drush. User login will actually give you the one-time forgot password login link for a particular user account if you need to get access to that quickly. If you just want to get more information about a particular user, you can use the user information command. We can just run that really quick to see what kind of info it'll give us. You'll notice after looking at the help that you can actually provide user ID, username, or email address for the user, and it will match on all of those fields. So this is a really good way if you get, say, a support request from a particular email address and you don't have any other information about that user, you can use this tool and their email address to try and figure out which user account is associated with that particular email address. So if I run user info here on user ID 1, it'll tell us that the username on this particular site is root, and blake.hall@lullabot.com is the email address. It gives me a list of roles and whether or not that account is currently active. A couple other user commands that you can take advantage of are user create. That will actually let you use Drush to create a new user account. And user password I actually use rather frequently, especially with Drupal 7. The password hashing scheme has changed in Drupal 7, so the same tricks to update a user's password from the command line don't work the same in 7. So the Drush command is actually a really great shortcut to reset a password for a developer account if you forgot what your password was. As an example, if I forgot the password for my user account, user ID 1, and I need to log into this site, I can use the user password command, or UPWD for short. So if I take a look at help for the user password command, I need to specify the username that I'd like to change the password for, as well as the password. So if I want to change the password for my root user to bunnies, the command would look like this. And now when I go to log into my test site, I will have to use the password bunnies to log in. That command comes in really handy, especially in Drupal 7, since the password hashing scheme has changed. Another really handy set of commands that I find myself using all of the time have to do with the database for the site. It's this set of SQL commands up here. These Drush commands will let you do things like really quickly connect to the MySQL command line for your site, or print out the SQL connection information if you need to know what username and password this site's particularly using, or if you even need to make a backup of the entire database. So let's take a look at a couple of those commands. The first one I find myself using a lot is SQL CLI. So if I just type that, it uses the connection information that's stored in settings.php and connects me to my command line MySQL client. So here I can take a look at my database, run queries, add indexes, do any sort of database administration tasks without having to remember the actual connection details. I find that really handy. I find myself doing that several times a day. Another command that comes in handy is SQL conf, or SQL configuration. This will basically just print out the connection details. So it will show you which database that this site is currently using, for example, the server it's located on, the username and password information, and the like. Another database Drush command that's handy is SQL query. So this will actually let you run SQL from the command line without dropping into a full command prompt. So if you want to take a look at one particular node or one particular record in a random table without actually going into a MySQL command line prompt, this is a really good way to do it. So as an example, we could run SQL query select star from node where node ID is 1. And we'll get back the record in the node table for node ID 1. Probably the most useful, or second most useful, SQL drush command is SQL dump. This will actually make a backup of our database for us. So this command takes a couple of parameters. The one that I find myself using, the two that I find myself using most often are the result file option. That will basically let you specify which directory your database backup should be stored in. And then the second one I find myself using is gzip. So it'll actually compress the database backup while it's being made. So if for my demo site here, if I needed to make a really quick database backup, I can just run SQL dump gzip, so it's compressed, and then result file with the full path we want to save our database. So I'm going to put it at my desktop, and we'll just say demo.sql. And now we have a database dump on my desktop. The file name is right there, and if I hop over to my desktop and take a look, we can see that there we go. Now this is really handy for us to just grab and email off to another developer, or copy to another server, or take care of whatever we need to do with it. As a developer, I've found that Drush will save me a lot of time, and especially a lot of clicking in the admin interface. And these are just a few of the Drush commands that I find myself using on a day-to-day basis to save myself time and make my life easier. Thanks for watching.